This is part 4 of Federalist number 36. I've already mentioned the courses that are available by teaching company. In the last part, I talked about the one that is about before the American Revolution and the one on American Revolution by Alan Galzo. This one is by another professor. I'm just drawing a blank. I can't think of the name right now. But he speaks very slowly, and you will like listening to that one. And the texts are also available, so you can benefit from that. And also there's one on the Federalist Papers, which I've shown already, I believe. It's by Professor Pangle, Pangle. Make sure, if you can, watch that too. It's very good. So now we are beginning of paragraph 12. You can just read along with me. Many specters have been raised out of this power of internal taxation to excite the apprehensions of the people. Double sets of revenue officers, a duplication of their burdens by double taxations, and the frightful forms of odious and oppressive poll taxes have been played off with all the ingenious dexterity of political legerdemain. He says, so anti-federalists have been writing all sorts of stuff in the papers, talking about double taxation, talking about duplication of burdens, how people have to do the same things that they do for state government. They have to do it for federal government too, whether it's money or whatever else they want. So he says, all these things have been done to excite you people, to get you all nervous and worried, and to make you against ratifying this new Constitution. He says, this is not right. It's not right at all. So in the next paragraph, he says, as to the first point, there are two cases in which there can be no room for double sets of officers. One where the right of imposing the tax is exclusively vested in the Union, which applies to the duties on imports. The other where the object has not fallen under any state regulation or provision, which may be applicable to a variety of objects. In other cases, the probability is that the United States will either wholly abstain from the objects preoccupied for local purposes, or will make use of the state officers and state regulations for collecting the additional impositions. This will best answer the views of revenue because it will save expense in the collection and will best avoid any occasion of disgust to the state governments and to the people. At all events, here is a practicable expedient for avoiding such an inconvenience, and nothing more can be required than to show that evils predicted do not necessarily result from the plan. So he says, whenever the federal government can, it will ask for state government's help, state government's bureaucracy, and this way not only the cost to the federal government, which means the cost to you, American citizens, taxpayers, will be reduced, but also in the process there will be a trust building that will be going on, because you all will see that what we are doing is for your own good, and whenever we can, we'll ask the state bureaucracy to help us so that you know we are being transparent, we are being clear, we are not hiding anything from you. As to any argument derived from a supposed system of influence, it is a sufficient answer to say that it ought not to be presumed, but the supposition is susceptible of a more precise answer. If such a spirit should infest the councils of the Union, the most certain road to the accomplishment of its aim would be to employ the state officers as much as possible and to attach them to the Union by an accumulation of their emolument. This would serve to turn the tide of state influence into the channels of the national government instead of making federal influence flow in an opposite and adverse current. But all suppositions of this kind are invidious and ought to be banished from the consideration of the great question before the people. They can answer no other end than to cast a mist over the truth. So he said, if there are accusations or if there is distrust, there might be bribery from one level of government to another, let's say, things that can happen, money can get lost, there might be people that will be looking for getting more money for doing things that they should not be doing. He says, possibly that might happen, but that should not really ruin our whole experiment. Here when he says we should not cast a mist over the truth, in other words, don't make something that clearly can work into something that cannot work because you're thinking of every awful thing that can happen. The next paragraph says, as to the suggestion of double taxation, the answer is plain. The wants of the Union are to be supplied in one way or another. If to be done by the authority of the federal government, it will not be to be done by that of state governments. The quantity of taxes to be paid by the community must be the same in either case. With this advantage, if the provision is to be made by the Union that the capital resource of commercial imposts, which is the most convenient branch of revenue, can be prudently improved to a much greater extent under federal than under state regulation, and of course will render it less necessary to recur to more inconvenient methods. And with this further advantage, that as far as there may be any real difficulty in the exercise of the power of internal taxation, it will impose a disposition to greater care in the choice and arrangements of the means, and must naturally tend to make it a fixed point of policy in the national administration to go as far as it may be practicable in making the luxury of the rich tributary to the public treasury in order to diminish the necessity of those impositions which might create dissatisfaction in the poorer and most numerous classes of society. Happy it is when the interest which the government has in the preservation of its own power coincides with a proper distribution of the public burdens and tends to guard the least wealthy part of the community from oppression. So here again he says, by cooperation, by being wise, we can stop the extra costs that should not be. If a state government can do something for the federal government, or if the state government has statistics, data that the federal government can use, that will be helpful, that will build trust. And again, federal government will be wise not to tax people too much, not to impose too many burdens. This way, the least wealthy people, which he says there's quite a bit of them, not that he says they're poor, but here he says, which might create dissatisfaction in the poorer and most numerous classes of society. those with lower incomes, which create the greater number of the people, at least they won't be burdened too much because of unwise tax policies of the federal government. So it's at the end of the day, their well-being is one of our prime objects. We want the whole country to prosper. And that's why we've given you this new constitution, and we're hoping that you will ratify it. We'll come back to part 5.